Hello, this is Lucas, Strike the Sun, MD, and it's Poetry Thursday again. Last week I did Elizabeth Barrett Browning's Sonnet 43, How Do I Love Thee, Let Me Count the Ways. And this week I've decided to give up the recitation thing. It's just much easier to write it down and read it. I'm going to start with the poem first, so that you can get to the reading right away, and then I'll give my thoughts on it after. I believe this was written or published in 1919, so just after the First World War. Make of that what you will. It's by William Butler Yeats, The Second Coming. Turning and turning in the widening gyre, the falcon cannot hear the falconer. Things fall apart. The center cannot hold. Mere anarchy is loosed upon the world. The blood-dimmed tide is loosed, and everywhere the ceremony of innocence is drowned. The best lack all conviction, while the worst are full of passionate intensity. Surely some revelation is at hand. Surely the second coming is at hand. The second coming. Hardly are those words out when a vast image out of Spiritus Mundi troubles my sight. Somewhere in sands of the desert, a shape with lion body and the head of a man, a gaze blank and pitiless as the sun is moving its slow thighs, while all about it reel shadows of the indignant desert birds. The darkness drops again, but now I know that 20 centuries of stony sleep were vexed to nightmare by a rocking cradle. And what rough beast, its hour come round at last, slouches towards Bethlehem to be born. I'm sorry, William. What? That's to put it lightly, a concerned poem. And given the time that it was published, shortly after the First World War, you can see why. I read this in college as well, and I did not appreciate it then. I didn't understand it. I didn't like anything. I thought it was too complex, and I did not get it as well. I couldn't appreciate it because the imagery went over my head, and I just wasn't at a point where I could think critically about literature. Even though I was taking literature courses, I was not prepared for it. Now that I'm older and have seen more of the world, I relate to this poem greatly. I actually was talking to my friend, asking him what poem I should read next, and he was telling me to do an Emily Dickinson poem, and I was going to, but then I read it, and it made me think of this poem for some reason, and I relate to it with everything that 2020 has brought us. Coronavirus, continued fires in Australia. I assume those are still going. The impeachment trial in America. Basically everything that's happening in the world. It's a timeless poem. I believe Yeats had this, if I remember correctly from my college course, my professor said Yeats had this idea, the gyre, turning and turning in a widening gyre, that time sort of rhymed, or history rhymed in a way, and that the events might not be the same, but they're similar, which is why this poem is timeless. A little over 100 years later. And, turning and turning in the widening gyre, the falcon cannot hear the falconer. There's a lack of control, and things are falling apart, like it says. Things fall apart in the next line. The center cannot hold because everything's unraveling. The world is going, it's going nowhere except down. Mere anarchy is loosed upon the world, yeah. The blood-dimmed tide is loosed, and everywhere the ceremony of innocence is drowned. I believe that's a biblical reference to Noah with the tide and the drowning. And the ceremony of innocence, the people that were meant to be drowned were the worst of the worst. But in a way, I just think I'm not a religious person, so the ceremony of innocence is like a beautiful phrase. It's painful in a way. It makes me think like, oh, it's a ceremony could be a celebration, or it could just be an act, a putting on of airs, so to speak. And who's innocent? Oh, us humans, This is a dark poem. It hurts. The best lack all conviction, while the worst are full of passionate intensity. When things fall apart, it's gonna be a madhouse. Surely some revelation is at hand. Surely the second coming is at hand. Revelation and the second coming, of course, those are biblical references to Jesus coming back from the dead, and Revelation being the last book in the New Testament, when the apocalypse and rapture happen, and just wild things happen, to say the least. The second coming, hardly are those words out when a vast image of Spiritus Mundi troubles my sight. I think that's Latin. Spirit Mundi, I don't really know what Mundi is, but if I had to guess, makes me think of like monde, the French word for like Earth, I believe, or a planet or something like that. So I'm guessing it's like the Earth's spirit, or the planet's, the spirit of the Earth or something. I'm not too sure. Anyway, he sees something troubling, and that would be a sphinx. Somewhere in the sands of the desert, a shape with lion body and the head of a man. I don't know if it's an Egyptian sphinx, or maybe there's some other mythological sphinx I don't know about. I don't know what an Egyptian sphinx is for, but I feel like it's like a protector of the afterlife. I could be wrong. I don't know. Please let me know. And that sounds less concerned, so I'm imagining it's some Latin or Roman or Greek myth or something. I just don't know. But whatever that sphinx is, it's a troubling sight. A gaze blank and pitiless as the sun. It doesn't care about you. The sun brings life, but it's there, and you're here, and that's the extent of the relationship. It's uncaring. It's moving its slow thighs. It's walking, while all about it real shadows of the indignant desert birds. Operative word being indignant. Let's leave it at that. I think of like vultures, scavengers, which at this point in time, with this poem, we would all be, probably. The darkness drops again. The end times, my friends. But now I know that 20 centuries of stony sleep were vexed to nightmare by a rocking cradle. What beautiful. Yeats is fantastic. I believe that, this is the second coming, but it's not Jesus. It's something much worse. Or if it is Jesus, things have gone horribly wrong. Just horribly wrong. And what rough beast, its hour come round at last, slouches towards Bethlehem to be born. It sort of feels like if Jesus Christ were to come back with the second coming. This is what he's coming back for? This? Really? We're morally bankrupt and something is horribly wrong. This is not what should have happened. This should be a cause for celebration, a ceremony of innocence. But the ceremony is not a celebration. It's an act. And now we're gonna pay. It's a great poem. I recommend reading it. I'll leave a link to it. Tell me what you think. And if you want me to read a poem, do a reading of it for my next Poetry Thursday or a Poetry Thursday down the line, please leave a comment and let me know. I will get to it. Thank you. Goodbye.